Welcome, wrestling fans, to the very first ever edition of Real Wrestling Chat Online. I'm your honored and distinguished host, Hatchet. Some of y'all might remember me from Detox to Juggalos Real Wrestling Talk. I decided to strike out on my own, give this shit a shot, if you know what I'm saying. Wicked clowns, woo woo. Anyway, I'd like to start off by talking about last night's Lockdown TNA pay-per-view. I don't know if any of y'all had the honor of watching that. It was a solid 7, 8, in my opinion, out of 10 stars. Show started off with Dixie Carter talking a little bit about the show. Jeremy Borash tried to ask her who she thought was going to win, Team Hogan or Team Flair. She kind of played up both sides but didn't pick a real winner. We were told by Taz and Mike Tenay that unfortunately Doug Williams had to be stripped of the X Division Championship and would not be able to defend it against Kaz and Shannon Moore in that triple threat match, as due to the volcano that erupted in Iceland, he was trapped in Britain over in the United Kingdom and was unable to travel, which I think is pretty gay. He should have never been stripped of the title, but hey, you know, whatever. TNA is going to do whatever they're going to do. Also on the gay factor, Sean Waltman showed once again what a little bitch he is by completely bailing on not only TNA but his tag team partner Scott Hall, when he made it more than clear over the weekend that he had no plans whatsoever to show up for last night's Lockdown pay-per-view, which, as I said, just goes to show what a little bitch and a worthless piece of shit he is. So, moving on, the show started off with RVD defeating James Storm to give Team Hogan the one-man advantage. The match was okay overall. I'd say maybe 3.5, 4 stars out of 5. Homicide defeated Kendrick, Sabin, and Shelley in a fatal 4-way with, the winner of that match replacing Doug Williams in the triple threat match that took place later on. Kevin Nash defeated Eric Young. That was a total squash match. I figured it would have went either way depending on whether or not TNA was going to be playing up the band or not. They kind of did, but then again, they kind of didn't. So I wasn't really too impressed with the fact that Eric Young had been built up and been shown to be a badass and was standing up to Nash, and it was a total squash match. Madison Rayne is the new TNA Knockouts champion after she pinned Tara. That is, of course, thanks to Lacey Von Erich hitting Tara with I believe it was one of the TNA Knockout Tag Team titles. I'm not exactly sure why Lacey Von Erich wasn't a part of this match. I mean, TNA is using the whole Freebird rule, which means that all 3 members of the Beautiful People are the tag team champions, so I thought, and they had made it up to be that it was going to be all 3 members of the Beautiful People versus Tara and Angelina Love. Speaking of Angelina, apparently there was some nipple slippage. I didn't catch it, but then again, I got a girlfriend, so I'm not going to go all ape shit if a chick slips a nip. I mean, how many times has a titty popped out in professional wrestling? I mean, just look at the WWF/E, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, Madison Rayne's now the new TNA Knockout Champion, which, at least she pinned somebody and actually earned it, unlike Angelina, who won it by opening a lockbox, but I don't want to get into that. That's for another show, and that's if I even decide to talk about that. All I could say is how many fucking times can Taz say lockbox and yam bag. Speaking of which, Yambag came up a couple of times last night during the Lockdown pay-per-view. I swear Taz needs to start being himself and quit trying to be Jerry Lawler. That's all I got to say about that. TNA is trying to be their own, but they're trying too much to be like the WWF of old during those fucking Attitude eras. Let's see. Kazarian defeated Homicide and Shannon Moore to become the new X Division champion. As I stated earlier, Homicide replaced Douglas Williams after winning that fatal 4-way earlier in the night. In all honesty, I thought Shannon Moore was going to become the new X Division champion, but instead it was Kazarian. More power to him. Whatever. I think Douglas Williams shouldn't have been stripped, but again, hey, whatever. TNA is going to do what they want to do. Team 3D totally squashed Hall and Nash, and Kevin Nash had announced after his match against Eric Young that as long as he had breath in him, he would always have Scott Hall's back. So it ended up being the Outsiders versus Team 3D in big surprise as St. Louis, since it took place in St. Louis, Missouri, street fight, and Team 3D totally squashed the Outsiders. So yeah, that was a big surprise. I figured they were going to push the ban, but they didn't. Angle defeated Ken Anderson. That match was pretty damn good. I'd say, in my opinion, that was the best match of the whole show. Yeah, Angle pulled off another, top of the steel cage moonsault like he did back in WWF. But he also hit some other high-impact moves. Ken Anderson put on a good showing. I figured Anderson was going to win this since Kurt Angle's taken some time off after this pay-per-view. But Kurt Angle won, so, that's cool. Damn good match overall is all I could say. I was surprised that the world title match wasn't the main event, unless this was a double main event card, which it wasn't being billed that way. But AJ Styles defeated the Pope, D'Angelo Dinero, to retain the TNA World Championship. AJ Styles completely carried this whole fucking match. Pope had a couple of good spots here and there, but overall AJ Styles proved once again why he is the phenomenal one, completely carrying Pope the entire match. The main event ended up coming down to Team Hogan versus Team Flair. Started off with Robert Roode and Abyss going at it. The fans didn't really seem too into the match until RVD got involved, and then again they didn't seem too into it until RVD started doing his trademark RVD, thumb pointing to himself, and that's when the fans got into it. Overall, the match was okay. I'd say maybe 3.5 out of 5 stars. The fans just really didn't seem that into it. They got a little more pumped and into it, once Jeff Hardy came out after he, was supposed to come out, got attacked backstage by Sting with the baseball bat. And speaking of Sting, he didn't really do too much. Used the baseball bat a couple of times, got, I believe, choke slammed by Abyss onto the thumbtacks, and that was about it for Sting. Hogan came out after Flair had come out, got himself involved, and Bischoff supposedly showed his allegiance to Hogan when he tossed him a pair of brass knucks, and Hogan beat the crap out of Flair. Pretty much every match except for the knockouts match, because, you can't show violence to women. Somebody bled in every one of these matches, and of course Ric Flair cut himself, bled like a stuck pig. He did his traditional, getting the crap kicked out of him, flopped, after ripping his t-shirt off, well, I should say his shirt off, flopped onto the thumbtacks back first, and, traditional Flair style. It would have been nice to, when Jeff Hardy climbed atop the steel cage, or I should say the lethal lockdown cage, there was a ladder and a table on top. He got both James Storm and Robert Roode up there, and he beat the crap out of him, put Storm on the table, and hit a simple splash, big splash if you will, off the top of the ladder. I realized, he was on top of a steel cage and didn't want to be too risky and, possibly risk injuring himself, too severely, but I think he should have been able to do the Swanton Bomb, and he didn't. So overall, like I said, the pay-per-view was a solid 7, maybe an 8. AJ Styles definitely carried his match. The best match of the night was definitely Kurt Angle versus Ken Anderson. And, just wasn't really too impressed with the Team Hogan, versus Team Flair match. And, I mean, the match opened up with, like I said, Abyss and Robert Roode going at it. And Robert Roode ended up beating the crap out of Abyss, because Abyss was supposedly injured. And then, even when it was a 2-on-3 advantage, in favor of Team Hogan, when it was RVD, Jeff Jarrett, and Abyss, they were getting the shit kicked out of them by Robert Roode and Desmond Wolfe. But in the end, Team Hogan won. That's all that matters. So, yeah, that's that. And this has been the first ever episode of Real Wrestling Chat Online. If you guys have any suggestions or comments, please feel free to leave them. I'd love to hear from you guys. I will be back with another show tomorrow after TNA's Impact tonight. It'll be interesting to see, now that Pope's no longer in the world title picture, if they give him a rematch, considering last night's match against AJ was a complete flop on his part, or if somebody else will be picking up the slack. Once again, this has been Hatchet, your distinguished host for the very first ever edition of Real Wrestling Chat Online. Thanks for joining, and we'll be back tomorrow.